retirement, correct? At the end of the year.
Correct. One position is currently filled by a long-term sub.
Oh, okay.
And what does the ECAPS with a 4 after it mean?
4 of them.
The 4 of them, it's one for each third grade class we have. There'll be one at
Okay.
North Fork in third grade, 2 at Franklin, and 1 at Brandywine.
Okay, all right, that makes sense now.
This is the last year of the Third Grade Success Act.
Yes, it is, as far as hiring ECATs.
But back to
Let
Sunny.
me ask you all a question. I've thought about this for years. What would happen if y'all have that daycare center there in that building? What if a preschool teacher were to be employed and work in that daycare center?
So
Is that
the
something?
the preschool program, in a lot of counties, universal preschool means preschool classrooms within the school buildings, Head Start, and child care representatives that agree to participate in the universal preschool program. Pendleton is one of 2 counties in the state that does not have Head Start, and Tiny Tots has opted to not participate as part of the universal preschool program.
Why, is there a reason for them not wanting to do that?
I think there's more requirements that they have to follow. They have to have the same types of certifications and those types of things that our school teachers have, and I just don't know that they want to do that. We have talked about it. I talked to this year.
Right now I'm doing a class for Eastern. There's a number of people in there taking this class that I'm doing because they are aides in, I guess, a preschool type thing or something, daycare in Hardy County. So that might be something to think about down the road is, forcing the hand that puts somebody in that building and puts qualified people in there, or else they seek qualification, because these were seeking qualifications to be able to do the job they were doing.
It's certainly always something that's open for discussion if they would want to participate. We look at that every year, but just at this time they don't want to.
I keep pushing buttons. I think that would be a good move for the daycare, and maybe, you wouldn't have so much of a need for this preschool stuff within the building because they're getting a jump start in daycare. I've always said that's where the crux of the problem is. Daycare at home might be different than daycare out in a building like Tiny Tots or whatever. It's just a thought.
Sure.
So this position that we are posting, so the long-term sub would have to reapply, right? For
Long-term sub have to
Anybody
reapply
could.
regardless.
oh,
Anybody could.
okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Anything else? Any other discussion? Then all in favor of granting the permission to post a preschool special needs at FES, and also to post for 4 third grade ECATs, please signify by saying aye. And opposed, no. Motion passes. Employment of personnel.
Employment of personnel, Derek Lambert, principal at Pendleton County Middle High School. Stephanie Amick, long-term substitute English language arts teacher at Pendleton County Middle High School for grades 7 through 12. Megan Light, special education coordinator and human resource executive secretary at the central office. Catherine Moats, half-time cook at Brandywine Elementary School and half-time custodian at Pendleton County Middle High School. Kathy I for bus driver number 5424. Natasha Bowers, extracurricular middle school girls head softball coach. Catherine Moats, extracurricular bus driver for summer program, Energy Express. Adam Ruddle, the summer program for Energy Express. Tina I, summer program for Energy Express, for cook. Geraldine Swidgunski, custodian for the summer program for Energy Express. Kaylee Murray, substitute aide. Evan Kyle, substitute bus driver, Kaylee Murray, substitute cook, Catherine Moats, substitute custodian, Brandon Mallow, substitute custodian, and Ryan Mitchell for restricted substitute teacher.
Give my recommendation for employing the personnel as presented.
Our superintendent's recommended employing the personnel as presented. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or are there any questions? Then all in favor of employing the personnel as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes. Approval of contracts.
Approval of contracts, superintendent secretary supplement.
Give my recommendation for approval of the superintendent secretary supplement.
Our superintendent's recommending that we approve the superintendent secretary supplement. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions?
Yes, I'd like to know how much the supplement is, and what, the second question I might ask is, why?
The supplement's for an amount of $5,000, and the reason for the supplement is to pay for all the extra duties and assignments that the superintendent secretary is responsible for. And there's a long list of differentiated assignments for the superintendent's secretary as opposed to other executive secretaries.
So the other secretaries in the building do not have as much responsibility, is that what you're saying?
The other secretaries in the building would not have as much responsibility as the superintendent's secretary, no. Because Lisa, one of the things she does, or the superintendent's secretary, all the year-end reporting, all the reports, all the stuff that we have to send in to make sure that all that's taken care of. There's a lot of additional things required out of the superintendent's secretary. Yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Then all in favor of approving the contract for the superintendent secretary supplement, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes. Rescission of retirement.
Rescission of retirement, Lisa Jamison.
And you have my recommendation to approve the rescission of retirement.
Our superintendent's recommending that we approve the rescission of the retirement for Lisa. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any questions? Then all in favor of, I'll say enthusiastically rescinding the retirement, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no.
Thank you, Lisa.
Motion passes. Non-paid coaches.
Approval of non-paid coaches, Billy Beechler.
And you have my recommendation to approve Billy Beecher as a non-paid coach, and this is for girls softball, correct?
Our superintendent's recommending approval of Billy Beechler as a non-paid coach. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions?
When we see those, are those sport specific, or can he help with any sport? How does that work?
It's sport specific because
Sport
those coaches
specific.
recommend that, and
Okay,
we meet with them according to that sport.
okay.
Any other questions? Then all in favor of approving Billy Beechler as a non-paid coach, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes. Volunteers and chaperones.
Approval of volunteer and chaperones as listed for Brandywine Elementary School, Franklin Elementary School, and Pendleton County Middle High School.
You have my recommendation to approve the volunteer chaperones as listed.
Our superintendent's recommending approving the volunteers and chaperones as listed for Brandywine, Franklin Elementary, and Pendleton County Middle High. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? And all in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion passes and nothing under leaves of absence. So that finishes us up under the personnel, and we move back to finance.
All right, let me scroll down the agenda here. So under 6A, we have the FY 25-26 schedule of proposed levy rates. I have a couple items under there to review, and then obviously approving the levy rates. So just a quick reminder, for those of us that may not always remember, there are the 4 classes of property. Class 1 is not taxed anymore, the agricultural, personal property and those. Class 2, owner-occupied residential property, used for residential purposes, and a couple other items. Class 3, all real and personal situated outside the municipality that is not taxed, and all farmland not taxed in Class 1 or Class 2. And then Class 4 is all property inside the municipality, such as the town of Franklin, that is not taxed in prior classifications. So nothing under Class 1. You have the Class 2, and then 3 outside a municipality, 4 inside a municipality. So that's just, and so then showing the chart of the tax assessed values, how they have increased from just over 200 million countywide to over 700 million. Pretty steady increase. As I said at the last meeting, there was a big upwards adjustment in the 21-22 timeframe when the pipeline was assessed higher than it was supposed to be. It turns out to be the upgrade to that. Then it came back down to a more even increase. The next one just shows individual amounts. The 5th page shows the amounts from the assessor's office. We have to take what the assessor gives to us, and then we apply the rates, and the rates are set by the state. So the Board of Education has no control over the amounts of taxes or the rates, only if the county had an excess levy, which we do not, would the school board have any control over that. You can see the Class 2 properties, the Class 3 broken out. Personal public utility property is largely in Class 3. You can see Class 4 is fairly small because that is in the town limits of Franklin. So it's going to be relatively small compared to the rest of the county. You can see some of the exempt values in the 2nd column. I know certain, like school buildings, would certainly not be subject to tax. I don't know the status of the Navy base. I don't know the status of every nonprofit and how the appraiser goes about appraising all those and how they do all that. So 2nd column is the exempt. The 4th column is the homestead exemption. And then you get to the 5th column, column E, which is at 739,407,806. Those are the assessed values for tax purposes. Assessed values for tax purposes. We then get to the schedule of proposed levy rates that Mr. Hedrick has to sign some copies of that we have to send to the state and put in the newspaper for 2 weeks publication. Those same column E amounts come over at 739,407,806 multiplied by the rates in the middle column, 38.8 cents per $100, 77.6. And that generates the taxes, local taxes that will go to the school system. You have a gross amount of over 4.1 million. You allow for some delinquencies and uncollectible taxes. The county generally does a little better than that, but we allow conservatively for budget, less any tax discounts. And then you get the local property tax collection of 3.8. The assessor's valuation fund, the assessor gets to take up to 2% for office expenses and salaries, and they do take 2%. Most in the state do, not all, but it's a maximum of 2%. That comes down to a net of $3,780,990. We'll look at preliminary budget tonight, and you'll see that number under local taxes in there. So this is levy, estimated levy for tonight. Proposed levy rates. Obviously, nothing will change between now and the 3rd Tuesday in April, but this meeting will stand adjourned at the end, and we'll make these rates official at the 3rd Tuesday. But this is for approval for the proposed levy rates and the amounts to be raised by those proposed levy rates.
You have my recommendation to approve the schedule for 2025-26 proposed levy rates as presented.
Our superintendent has recommended that we approve the levy rates as presented, as proposed. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Then all in favor of approving the schedule of proposed levy rates, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. The motion passes. The levy rates are approved.
Okay, so the next item under 6B says preliminary budget. Now, this is not due until the end of May, so the second meeting in May is the target date to have the budget approved. But we largely know, unless something comes out of left field from the legislature, we largely know at this point what we are going to receive. We don't anticipate any pay raises per se. I know there's a couple bills out there. I don't know that there was any traction this year with the budget issue. So assuming no changes, the carryover, so the first rectangle I have there, the revenue, I'm showing some revenue items, anticipating a $1.5 million carryover at a minimum from FY '25 to FY '26 to help balance the budget, as it always does. Taxes, we just looked at the proposed levy rates at $3,789,90. That is a bit of an increase from the $3.65 million for the current year. And again, those assessed evaluations did increase. A little bit over $100,000 increase in local taxes. Generally speaking, the state takes away 85% of any increase. We get to keep 15. But the state aid always adjusts every year for if there's a pay raise or a difference in experience. So you can never see the exact math except behind the scenes. You only really keep 15% of the local tax growth, but it's better. It used to be 2%, so that's certainly still better. So of that 100 and some thousand, 125,000, we'll get to keep maybe 20,000 or so. So at any rate, the other ones are pretty much the same going through. The next item I have for just highlighting tonight, state aid. State aid, page 2 of the PDF, $7,737,960. Current year, $7,728,000. So it went down only by about 9,000. So it didn't go down all the increase in local taxes, but that's because there would be some fluctuation. You get transportation reimbursements, you get some maintenance reimbursement, and you have people with more experience. So you would expect it to go up a little bit, all else being equal. So again, the bottom line is state aid is basically flat, and taxes would increase roughly just over $100,000. But again, we have expenses to take care of some of those revenues. Then we have some insurances and retirements. The next one with a notation or a rectangle, page 3, PEIA. Of course, there is a 15% increase on PEIA allocations and PEIA revenue and premium costs. And so the allocations for Pendleton County come up to $1.9 million for PEIA. That's offset by expenditures on the expense side. The next item, National Forest Land payment. Wasn't that many years ago, we get about 120, 110,000 a year. Last year, 77,000. This year's budget is 75. It's still trying to get a passage in Washington. We're still hoping that it does. I haven't taken it out of the FY26 budget, but I did reduce it down to 50,000. Hopefully that's on the low side. And I do know they're trying to get something done, but again, nothing has been accomplished yet because they still need to fund the current year, next year, and the following. They're trying to get a 3-year reauthorization for secure rural schools.
JP, before you go to, what's public charter school, a little bit above what you just
Well,
talked
we
about?
have to set aside, so public charter schools, right there, yes, and that will change that. So of our state aid, what we would get, and it's included in the enrollment, part, or included in the, not included in our enrollment, but included in the calculations, $24,000 in this preliminary amount is being set aside to fund the charter schools. So it shows it directly. Any student that lives in our county that goes, and somewhere there is a list, I don't have it with me, it shows how many students attend the virtual academy, how many students attend any other academy that's out there. So that's where it shows
Or it
directly.
covers the virtual academy too.
Yes,
The virtual academy,
any that qualify. So that's where we have, so behind the scenes, there's information that I get. So that state aid is really short, that $24,309. We would get that much more in true state aid based upon those calculations. So they determine the amount that we get based upon a gross amount, including the charter schools, but then that gets turned around and you add this up among 55 counties across the state. That's one of the ways that they are funded. That's one of the public means of funding. That doesn't even include the Hope Scholarship per se, but that's just how this works based on that. So I think it's going to end up closer to maybe 29,000 or so by the time final numbers come in. So pretty small compared to the other 55 counties, but there is an amount that goes. So that's 24,309. I expect it based on preliminary numbers to go up to maybe about 29 or so, something like that. Montague County might have several $1 million in Mon County in that allocation there. The next item, moving to expenditures, page 4 of the PDF, between some budgeting and some recalculation of expenses, the 4 ECATs, that's included. The state has gone ahead and funded those ECATs in preliminary computations. So that service personnel line for aides, ECATs, has been increased by 4 positions to go up to about 490,000 there. So part of that increased revenue up above was also to fund for the ECATs that was in there. So that's the expenditures for there. Just pointing that out. Professional sub, long-term subs vacant. We've had quite a number. You never know from year to year which of your positions will be filled by a regular personnel, which ones will be filled by a long-term sub. It is increased in the long-term sub budget upwards of 90,000, because I think that's where we're going to end close to this year, maybe not quite that much. The insurance line is the next line. This year's budget is 780. That's just for regular instruction, not service personnel and special ed. Increased from 782 to 888. The revenue went up several hundred thousand. The expenditures across all insurance will go up several hundred thousand. That just shows an example of that.
Did that bill pass that allow them to buy back this sick days they don't use?
It is still floating around.
Okay. Would you have to budget for that?
Well, if the bill ended up that county school boards had to pay it and there was no money from the state, and then yes, in theory,
Because you're
we
not
would
paying
have
subs, so you
right.
would be.
Well,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, in theory, but you don't. There's still no way to know until you did it how many subs you would save versus how many bonuses you would pay out for people selling back their sick leave. And so, Senate Bill 37, I believe, is still out there. I don't know that it's going to pass. But at the same time, it is still out there to buy back the sick leave for that. So yes, we'd have to find a way to fund that if it was on the books and our personnel wanted to sell us up to 10. I think it's worth up to 10 sick leave days. Then they could certainly do that if it were to pass. Page 6 of the PDF, bus replacement. We still need to buy buses, but the best route to go is the lease purchase route. So under lease purchase, you'll see some numbers in there of existing numbers. So doesn't mean we can't buy a bus next year. It just goes to show I'm budgeting nothing in the actual expense. Now, in the far right column shows what happened in FY24. We did purchase 2 outright buses for about $250,000. We lease purchased 2 buses, as that revenue comes on the books for a lease purchase and the expense offsets it. So the 4 buses totaled $501,000. That was in there. So I do know that Jerica has mentioned Chuck talking about when they get started on another bus, and it takes about a year to order them and get them in. So one's in the works right now. It's not been received, should be received soon, but I think it's been delayed a little bit. And then if we want another one, we'll have to start now, and it'll be another year before it's ready. So in one sense, we probably have as new of a fleet as we've ever had. Getting 5 or so in the past couple years, but there are several years that we didn't get them. And it does seem like the new buses, they're just not super reliable, which I don't like that fact. But so anyhow, can't solve all those things. So it just goes to show in there that we're not setting aside $150,000 in there for that. If we did have to spend it, my recommendation would be to at least purchase it. The reasonable interest rates that we get are more than offset by the increase in bus replacement money. And so that's why there's no direct. Then speaking of it, the next page 7, the next set of rectangles is principal and interest. So we have for the budget 25 year, towards the middle, 107,000 budgeted. I've budgeted 160 for next year to take care of any potential lease purchases that we would have to have on the books or potential ones for those. And so again, as the years go on, we will have to take into account, when do we buy a bus, when do we not, Do we lease purchase it, which seems to be a favorable way to go, and that just shows an example of where it shows up in the budget. A couple other smaller items, but that's really it. And so the bottom line is this budget, and I will go to page 8, skip down to page 8, the last comment for tonight on page 8 of the PDF. So where do I expect to end up a year from now? Well, it's hard to say a whole year from now, but that reserve for contingency is almost 1.2. It's usually always conservative, it's always understated, and I say that. So I still believe we'll be in very solid shape, but there obviously are concerns that we've talked about. So at a minimum, 1.2 million. This year I said 900,000. We're going to exceed that pretty handsomely. I don't expect it to be as much for next year. As inflation and things like that. But at the same time, showing that 1.187, that's reserved for contingency as we go forward to the end of a year from now. And so I expect that to be a little bit on the low side. So that's all that I have. It does reflect the current information of the budget, especially the revenue piece, the expenditure pieces. All the salaries are accounted for with the year increments. All the insurance increases are in there. So if anything changes, it should be fairly minor, but we'll keep you informed. And again, the official approval will be probably the second. It could be the first meeting in May, probably the second meeting in May. So
What
this
do we
is
know
just
about the
basic.
forest land money?
Well, you never know for sure. They
Yeah.
they have their own. They can pass budgets and do things and leave this off to the side for indefinitely. Hopefully sooner than later, they will do something with that. So yeah, that's something we can absorb, but at the same time, it still used to be $100,000. And if other stuff in the future gets taken away or reduced, it does add up over time. No doubt about that. Which is why we're trying to be proactive and still provide a lot of support for our personnel, but be proactive in decision making at the same time. So all I have for tonight for the budget. You can look at it. Any questions you have, you can ask me via email, ask me at the next board meeting, and we can go from there. So just basic information, no action needed on that one. 6C, budget revisions. The audit is not finalized yet, but I should be getting a finalized copy. But again, they did go ahead and it was a very good audit. They'll be giving me final numbers. This was just, I was waiting to hold off until the audit was complete to do an official carryover. So this is an additional carryover of funds from FY24 to FY25 of 157,146. It was a little higher than estimates. It all goes into the current year balances. Another reason I feel, so that was just items that were out there to be carried over based upon some reserve items and non-spendables that the auditors confirmed were good. And so 157,146 added from FY24 to FY25, supplement number 125.
You have my recommendation to approve budget revision supplement 125.
Our superintendent's recommending we approve budget supplement number 125. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? Then all in favor of approving supplement number 125 in the amount of $157,146, please signify by saying aye. And opposed, no. Motion passes. Financial update.
Financial update. I'll start with the one that says financial update 3/25/25. A couple, we've talked about this internally some in the last few weeks. I pulled a couple of those slides. So the first slide, and it could go back to the 1990s and it would look pretty similar. We were crawling along the bottom of this chart for many, many, many years, and sometimes we were below zero. You can see this goes back at least to 2009. 2008 was the first year of the 1,400 floor, but it was also the year that the special money from legislature started going away. So it stabilized us, but it still barely kept us going. It did enable us to maintain a system as the special money was being phased out. The 1,400 floor, even if it wasn't perfect, was there. And $200,000 was a big year of a surplus. And then some years it was barely break even. And then in 2019, 2020, House Bill 206 fully funded the 1,400 floor. So we went from getting funded for about 1,320 to a full 1,400. And then COVID came along. Obviously was a huge problem. It also brought some money with it in COVID. And then we did a bunch of projects and everything. So we went from 44,000 carryover to 504 to 976, 1.7, a million, 99, back up to 1.5, 1.7. And again, you just heard me talk about projecting for the end of, and that was the end of 27, 25, it's estimated to be 1.7 in my mind. I'm using 1.5 for the budget to be conservative. So we ended last year at 1.57. This year about 1.7. We did have a lot of reimbursements from prior year transportation expenditures that came through this year. And so that's another reason, you know, so you heard me talk about the budget, talk about adding in the age, which there's money for, the bus replacement. So obviously from that standpoint, as long as the formula stays and the 1,400 floor stays, then, you know, we have to be proactive, but the budget looks sustainable, being proactive though at the same time. And so what's my concern? So that's a brief history over the last, you know, number of years. Well, the concern obviously is on the next page. The concern is we get $180,000 a year Medicaid funding. What if that, and I use 150 for the budget, what if that goes away or gets reduced? Okay, there's a block. Forest land already maybe, it used to be 100 and some, it's already been reduced some. Title I is $275,000 per year. It goes to teaching primarily 3 educators, 1 each elementary, and then for some supplies and staff development. Title II is another, all these title programs underneath Travis. Title IV and V, those vary from year to year, more staff development and software. So either we do without, if those things, so that's a fair amount. Special education underneath Carrie's leadership, the federal piece, $280,000 per year. A lot of our personnel, particularly service personnel and aides, come out of the federal special education. Child nutrition, yeah, it's kind of a standalone program, but it is a huge program. And if that funding were to be cut, we'd still have kids to feed and kids to serve. So $650,000 in federal funding per year. So that totals over $1.5 million. Then you have state funding. Well, if the funding formula ever changes negatively, that's a concern. 1,400 floor, we get over $4 million per year more, and that number grows than what our current enrollment is. 1,400 versus 851, for example. If that was ever removed or somehow changed, and CIS, communities in schools, $300,000 per year. Well, that's a state grant, not federal, not part of the formula. We know for sure it is being reduced. We received $300,000 in this current year. We used to receive a little bit more. We're going to receive just over $260 next year. It's going to be phased out, and it's per site coordinator. It is not simply a block of money. And so it's going to be phased out to zero within several years. And so, so that's real. The others are concerns based on a lot of stuff. You know, we're not imagining it. There's a lot of conversation in various areas. So the $1.5 million surplus is cumulative. That's where we are at the end of the year. So if you take anything sizable to happen to this page on the negative, then that 1.7 disappears very quickly. You know, and it doesn't take a couple years for that whole thing to vanish. And so we are trying to maintain that and still spend and still support education and do good things at the same time, trying to keep an eye to the future and look at where are the priorities, where do we want to spend, putting the puzzle together. And it's, you know, it takes a lot of thought that goes into that. There will be more thought. As long as the landscape remains uncertain, there's going to be a lot of thought. Every year there'll be thought about, well, what do we think is going to happen? How did this year actually turn out? So, you know, I feel good right now about the process that we're looking at and what we have to work with. But it wouldn't take but a couple years or 300,000 or 400,000 reductions all of a sudden, and in 3 or 4 years we're looking at the money being gone, and then what do you do? In some of these counties, like Rome, a couple years ago had a several $1 million surplus, now it's a several $1 million deficit. Multiple reasons in Roane County, isn't just one thing, but it doesn't take long if things go off the rails. So this is just basic information that we have there.
And child nutrition, 650, is that basic food, or is that personnel, or?
It's reimbursement for meals, so it helps to pay for everything, basically. And then, so the whole program costs over $1 million a year. The county kicks in about $400,000, our sponsor contribution. A little bit of state money, but not a whole lot, maybe $60,000, $70,000 for some of their parts. So they get it based upon free and reduced. Now it's the CEP, community eligibility, everybody eats free. The break even, we're pretty much about break even community eligibility provision versus the old way of some people paid and some people didn't. But if, let's say the CEP went away, and let's say the funding, they give you so much dollars and cents per meal served. Let's say they reduce the amount they give you for meals, and you still have to feed the kids. Your labor costs are what they are, and your food costs are only going up because of food inflation. And so that contribution for child nutrition a couple years ago was $250,000. COVID made it kind of wacky. It didn't take us because all the COVID money came in. So 250 6 years ago to 400 now, the county contribution alone on that sort of thing. So, but yes, if the federal money was reduced, then yes, that ripples through the budget. It ripples through the budget. We look at that. So yeah, so out of the $1 million, $1.1 million child nutrition budget, about $650,000 is federal. Now during COVID, we got more because the individual meal rates were bumped up. We actually got more. We got multiple grants and more per meal. So it kind of postponed the effects of what we're feeling now for everybody across the country. Food inflation, other factors going in, and you repair a piece of equipment, the costs are higher, and all sorts of things that go into that. So it's just a lot of stuff to maintain there, but that's part of our federal funding is based on that. The next item is our enrollment, which is no huge surprise. And if I went back further, I started in 93, we were about 1460, and probably some of those records before then. This goes to about the turn of the century, to about 99, 2000, right after consolidation, 1352. Hanover closed right about, so we had a consolidation, Hanover closing in the early 2000s, so it's a couple of large drops there, countywide. And then you had a pretty steady decline for a long time, about 20 or 30 almost every year, almost like clockwork, for a long time declining. Special money from Charleston kept us afloat, Harold and Walt, and then the 1400 floor kept us afloat. Maintain and making decisions, cutting back here, cutting back there, maintaining decisions. And then kept going along. And then the Navy base closed in 1516. Didn't see as large of a decrease, kind of a delayed effect. Brandywine saw it, but countywide by 19 FY 20, we then saw a 70 student reduction, which might have been a delayed reaction to the Navy base, whatever it was. A couple large drops there based on some of those. So a large drop in the 14-15, another large drop. But ever since 20 or 21, we've somewhat stabilized. Is that the floor? Maybe 860. 860, 840, 850, and if you look at so that's just information. So we get funded, and since 2019, get funded on the flat 1400, and that's how those fund balances. Also, in addition to all the stuff that has been done, the purchases, the renovation, the reconstruction, still able to maintain that. It not only is it a hard act to follow, it would be impossible to do the same things because of all the coordination of events that happened and the leadership it took to keep everything going there. So BES loss of 61 students, that's from 99 to 25. Brandywine stayed pretty good for the first 10 years or so of this chart. Had the Navy base, saw some ups and downs, and then the Navy base closed and Brandywine fell way down, below 100. Now it's back up to about 114. Yep, a little bit more of people moving around a little bit. So 114 Brandywine, the current year. Franklin Elementary School, it's had the biggest percentage loss of any school in the county since the late 90s, early 2000s. The biggest percentage loss, 452 to 247. It has lost not half, but over 200 students, almost half of its population. It's hard to imagine. Of course, that building was pretty jam-packed up on the hill with 452 students. Of course, upper track closed and came up, and all those factors that came into play. And so Franklin Elementary at 247, largest percentage decrease in the county. PCMHS, right about the county average, loss of 203. It actually peaked a little bit. Some classes came through after consolidation, 589. And now at 386, kind of leveled off the past 5 or 6 years, middle high school. As we go forward, we look at situations and staffing and things. We have probably some fewer staff, but not all that many fewer staff now than when we had 589, and maybe a little bit less. So we just have to keep those things in mind. Not that we're not doing some good things. That's enrollment for middle high school. North Fork Elementary, it dropped early on, probably some of the effects of consolidation, and might be the primary effect, dropped pretty quickly. Brandywine stayed up. Then it leveled off, then it dropped again, and it has been pretty level. It's been up and down ever since FY11, 102 in FY11, 103 in FY25. A little bit up and down in the meantime, but North Fork has maintained. So North Fork and Brandywine, especially once Navy Base closed, have been pretty similar in terms of enrollment, in terms of staffing. They've been pretty similar. A couple exceptions here and there as far as that goes. Student enrollment, so Lisa always takes a lot of time, puts this together. It just simply shows what our enrollment is, the class sizes. It's just good data. So if we look at Franklin Elementary, October 1, 2024 at the top, we had 27 pre-K kids. Now, again, I can't be an expert on, individual needs. I just can't, of students. But if you have 20, you look at numbers like 27 preschool kids, and you have 3 preschool classrooms, and then you're looking at, I don't know what next year, you look at, where do the numbers fall? If there's a position that comes open, what do you do? When do you do something like that? And those are difficult decisions to make. So as we look at all different class sizes, it's just information. We're pretty much about 60 students per class. Kindergarten 65, 12th grade 65. Up and down in between. So that kind of says we've kind of leveled off. Now, if people start moving away or moving in, okay, that's going to change. We've kind of leveled off based on that information there. So just some basic information around there. The final one for this financial update, pupil to classroom teacher ratio. For a number of years, we had the smallest classes in the state. We now are like the 4th smallest. Some of it because loss of enrollment in Pocahontas Calhoun has dropped them faster than we've dropped. And Wetzel has a huge natural gas levy, and Wetzel has a lot of people employed. So the state average is 13 per class. We have 10.32 per class. At the very top of the chart is our neighbors, Hardy County, 15.64. And it's not really anything that's against Hardy County. They're pretty equally distributed in their county and in their schools. You have Moorfield Elementary, intermediate, middle, high school, and East Hardy. Their population isn't as sparsely, the whole sparse populated thing got started because of sparse population. Hardy is not as sparsely populated. They would love to have 10 students per class versus 15, I'm sure they would. But, the way they are just kind of segregated and their schools are spaced out, they've pretty much, maximized that pupil-teacher ratio at 15.64 in Hardy County. So that's just information on that particular item. House Bill 3387, Charles can update you on that. It was a handout about the regional school boards. If you want to talk about it, otherwise we'll just, I'll go past that handout. That's the regional school board handout. A couple items. Roane County votes to cut 27 positions across the school district. That's extreme, but that's Roane County's situation right now. Buchanan, Board of Education considers closing Buchanan Upshur Middle School and 2 elementary schools. Now, for a county the size of Upshur, more enrollment than us. The one consideration is that they go to a 712 complex. The article says Buchanan Upshur was built for 1,600, and they have 800 or 900 in the school right now. So they're under state control. The local board can propose things, have to get approval from the state if they're going to do it. They have several students as small as several schools as small as North Fork and Brandywine. They have 3 in Upshur County, just about 120, which I was surprised at. They may need to look at something like that, and then they're going to reconfigure if the state would approve it. And the final one, as I scroll through the Buchanan Intermountain, the Randolph Board of Ed is meeting all week long, according to the paper, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for RIF hearings, 30 to 40 RIF hearings, and then they'll vote on Thursday night, I guess, a final decision on the RIFs in Randolph County. Now, those are the extreme ones. There might be some others. Some are close to us, some are not. It's just information. So I feel like we're in good shape in Pendleton County, but I feel like we have to maintain awareness of all these different factors that are out there. So that's all I have under financial update. Unless there's any questions for me, be glad to answer that. Bill is out there. I didn't bring it up. And Jim Brown is doing a good job, I will say. It did go down last Monday. Just it had been a while, and kind of wanted to see what was going on in Charleston Monday a week ago. And Education Subcommittee, a little like old times, but Jim Brown spoke pretty forcefully, pretty passionately, and he was there the whole time. So he's doing a good job, I believe, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Any questions for JP? Then we move to facilities and facilities update.
All right, we'll cover a few things here and just some updates. The Klein Building, if you've been by there, we removed the glass doors where they load and unload items and put a roll-up door from overhead door there. It turned out really nice. We are going to use some trim work to cover up some of the block there. As we took out the old metal door, it left some of the concrete block edges exposed. We're going to tidy that up a little bit, and then inside the motor that rolls the door up, it's hanging down a little lower than I'd like for it to be. So the company's going to come back and flip that motor up the other way, just as a safety thing to get it up higher in the building. I'm pretty tall, I can get under it fine, but I don't like it hanging down quite as low. So we're going to get that corrected, and we'll get that project marked off. At Brandywine, we are still working on the window replacement over there from some of the old windows. And right now, I just got an email before I came over here. We're planning on April 21st. That's the day when there's no students in the building, to get those old windows out and new windows in. And they said they may need a little bit of time on the 22nd just to do some trim work and stuff around the windows. But that's been a project we've been working on most of the school year, just getting everything aligned and everything in place. But it sounds like that's going to happen. If you've noticed out at the high school, our sign is down, that everybody loves to see the messages on. Our issue there is the modem works off of Verizon, and there was just a little bit of signal there for about a year that it made it work okay, and then all of a sudden it quit being able to communicate with our computers and take updates. So we put a new modem in. That didn't help anything. So the companies worked with us. They sent us a Wi-Fi bridge. So we are installing that on the building, and we'll use our Wi-Fi signal to communicate with the sign. Eric's working on that. Worked on it some today. Hopefully by the end of the week we'll have that hopefully back up and running. Haven't forgot about the Alt Ed building and our dedication. Since the weather's broken some now, we can maybe get that taken care of. As Mr. Hedrick did say earlier, the band building has some frozen pipes. And when that building was built, there's not a lot of insulation in that building, and some of the water lines run up into the attic above the insulation and then back down the wall into the bathrooms or into the concession stand. And so ends up every year, even though we try to drain it and get all the water out, if somebody turns the heat off or whatever, we end up with some broken pipes So we're going to try to fix that and correct it, so hopefully we don't have that happen anymore, because it happens about every year. And so we want to try to get that taken care of. And Sonny, I did get a second quote for the stage curtains at North Fork, and so I'll review with us here, and we'll see what we can get going on that. The second quote was a little bit cheaper, but not much from what the first quote was. So that's about all I have for updates on facilities.
Any questions under facilities?
I do have one. Well, at the games this weekend, did you notice in the auxiliary gym, there's several lights out?
Yeah, we got
Did you
some in the
notice
main
that?
gym too, in behind the
There's about
bleachers.
6 out in that
Yeah.
auxiliary gym.
Yeah, we've considered a couple different times switching those. Those are still the old long bulbs in those. Switching those over to LEDs a couple times, and that might be something we do. But we'll get those fixed back up. But the ones in there in the main gym, where you come out from the weight room and the boys' locker room, there's 3 that are kind of hard to get to there that go out. But yeah, so we'll look at those.
Anything else under facilities? And that'll finish us up there. We have nothing under old business or new business, so when we get to other, we're at school improvement, student achievement.
Okay, I have 2 things. Mr. Hedrick might want to add some other things. We are currently working on the textbook adoption for social studies and preschool curriculum, and I'll bring those final selections back to you guys by June 1st. This is kind of our deadline. And we did have a regional social studies fair winner. We sent 5 up to Musselman this past weekend. We did have 1 winner. Ross Pownell won first place in Division 2, which is grades 6 through 8, sociology. So he'll have the opportunity to move on to the state competition.
Anything else there? Any questions?
Mrs. Sevner, do we have a class at the high school today with?
100%, yeah, 7th grade.
Well,
They've been
congratulations.
doing that pretty recently. There's a March Madness competition right now, and that's making a big difference. So, I'm very proud of them.
That's a good thing to bring up. Anything else under school improvement, student achievement? Superintendent's update.
JP touched a little bit on House Bill 3387 is the, it's in the House right now, it's out to the floor. It basically talks about a pilot program to regionalize school boards, particularly some school boards that are either under state control or becoming under state control. The real issue from our standpoint, and I've been working with our organization, the Association of School Administrators, we've been looking at and talking to legislators and to state board members also along with that, is the fact that it doesn't delineate between counties that are coming under state control or under state control as to other counties down the road who may not be under state control or becoming under state control. And we're trying to work to solve that a little, and we'll continue to do that. We have some more teams meetings and other things coming up, and contacting and talking to our legislators, because we're a little concerned of the broadness of the bill, and we think it needs to be narrowed down, or simply there needs to be a lot more details and explanation in the bill. The other thing, and JP touched on this too, and we're talking about funding. Funding's on everybody's mind right now, as we're seeing counties who used the COVID funds, the pandemic funds, to prop themselves up, and now that money's gone, and all of a sudden you see counties who are cutting 25, 30 teachers, closing schools. We're seeing declining enrollment. We're seeing other issues with county schools, and it's definitely impacting us. The federal funds right now, we're not sure how all that plays out. We know we're good for next year. So one of the things, as JP was talking about, we need to be proactive, and I think we have been. My staff heard many times I talked about the 7 fat cows coming up out of the Nile. They get eaten later by the 7 skinny cows. And if you've been in education as long as I have, you see those cycles, and we were certainly in a cycle of having more money probably than school systems have ever had. But you have to know that cycle ends, and then the next part of that cycle is cutbacks and changes. Now, we positioned ourselves well during COVID. We were very proactive in funding preventive maintenance projects, and you know, I applaud the board as well as the staff here for making those things work. We will continue to be proactive in looking at areas where we think we have an opportunity, either through retirement or other things, to make some cuts, because we see that as being proactive down the road and helping us. As JP said, it only takes, while it looks like a lot of money, it really isn't in this day and age, and it doesn't take long to get on the other side and back to where we were at. So I just want to continue to push that out. We will, even before this year's out, I will recommend some other reductions and things I think we can do. Now, the sky's not falling. We're not in a panic. We're trying to be strategic and make sure we don't get into a panic. And that's our, you know, that's kind of our plan and our motto where we're at, as opposed to, you know, waiting until the sky is falling and then you have to make really hard decisions. We're trying to be very proactive, very strategic, and try to do things that will cause the least amount of issues, not just for our students and our academic performance, but with our staff too, because we want to be very supportive of our staff during this time. So that's kind of where we're at funding wise, and that's that's the end of my update.
Any questions for the superintendent? Then, conference and meeting update.
JD and I are at South Branch Career and Technical Center tomorrow at 8:30. Sonny and I have an epic meeting the 27th at 12. And I think that's it. The next board meeting is just a week away.
Yeah, next board meeting's coming up quick. All right, the next board meeting is April 1st, a week from today, at 5:30 here. And tonight, instead of asking for a motion to adjourn, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn and reconvene on Tuesday, April the 15th, per West Virginia statute. So do I have a motion to adjourn and reconvene on Tuesday, April 15th?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any questions? All in favor of adjourning and reconvening on April 15th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion